The backlog, a gamer's worst and best friend, an ever expanding catalogue of games and wonder that at times seems insurmountable. Hey guys, I'm Zemore, the dad in DPS, and this is a series where I try to tackle the insatiable monster that is my backlog, where I confront games and rate them for your viewing pleasure. And today's game is the Thaumaturge. Thaumaturge? Thaumaturge? In the game, they call them temperamancers, so that also helps. Either way, if that my pronunciation is bad, leave a comment down below. Now, the way that we're going to approach today's game is this is going to be a first impression video. I've not completed the game yet. I have played a couple of hours into it, and I've got a basic gist of how I feel about the game so far. And this was suggested by Diofin Gaming, big friend to the channel. He's been incredibly helpful to us throughout the years, so big thanks to Dio and a big mention to him. But yeah, so this is a first impressions. Now, the Thaumaturge is a game set in 1905, so the early 20th century, and we are set in Warsaw. Now, if you don't know about Warsaw, it is a Polish city that has had a lot of things happen to it in the past, I'll be honest, but in the current era, in the current period of time in the game, it was a place that was owned essentially by Russia. So it was considered to be part of Russia, and it wasn't considered to be Poland by Russia, let's say. But obviously the Polish people have a really rich and diverse history, and this is a Polish game made by a Polish developer. So, you know, these guys are getting out their culture, and I think that's absolutely fantastic. Now, you follow the exploits of Victor Schultzky. He is a tempermancer or a thaumaturge. This is a magician of sorts that is kind of like a combination of a necromancer and a Jedi. He can communicate with his demons or spirits called, oh god, what do they call them? I honestly forget what they call them. But like salutars, he can communicate with salutars, which are essentially demons or spirits. And with the aid of these salutars, he can influence people and, in a sense, manipulate them. And the way that a Jedi would, like, you know, these aren't the things you do, blah, 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 blah. And on top of that, he has the ability to sort of have, like, super empathy. Like, for example, if he were to pick up or touch anything of yours, or even just you, he could get a sense of what you're feeling and what you're thinking and what type of person you are. And as you explore the game, you use these powers to unravel mysteries and solve crimes in some sense, and basically figure out what's going on in the world. On top of that, you tame more salutars or demons as you go through the game, which then gives you different powers and essentially clears up the turmoil in the areas that you go through, because these creatures basically incite strong emotion in others. So for example, if one is an absolute rage psychopath and it's hanging around somewhere, it's going to cause everybody to be rage psychopaths. If one likes causing uneasiness and distrust, then people will be uneasy and distrust others while it's around. And it quite critically, they attach themselves to a specific person that has a flaw. In the case of our main character, Victor, his is the flaw of pride, which lured his salutar to him, which is, you know, apparently relatively friendly. But he basically guides Victor through the world and helps him understand his powers and, you know, do different kind of things. Now that's the basic gist of the story. I'm glossing over a lot of things that I do already know, obviously, because this is the first impressions video. But in terms of the premise, I think it's an absolutely fantastic one, and I'm very, very interested in seeing how the story of the game unfolds as I go. Now, in terms of the aesthetic of the game, I think that it's actually quite stunning. Now, I've been playing it exclusively on my Steam Deck, and you're probably not getting the full extent of the graphics in this video if I was running it on a PC that could run it at a higher rate and whatnot. So the graphics, what you're seeing here, are Steam Deck only. But the game is actually pretty. I quite enjoy that aesthetic. I love the early 19th century look. I love the clothes. I love the architecture. I love the whole iconography of it. So aesthetically, it's very much up my alley in terms of what I would like to see in real life of things. You know, I living in Scotland, there are a lot of really old buildings and grand architecture. So it strikes me as something that I think's very pretty and beautiful. To other people, it might seem quite dark and grimy, and that is true as well. That period of history is quite dark and grimy, you know, the Industrial Revolution and all that kind of thing. Like, there is those aspects of the game, but I think that it has a certain charm to it, for definite. Now, the way that the gameplay loop in this game has worked so far as I've played through it is that essentially you can travel around the map. Currently, I'm in Warsaw. I don't know if you move on to different places in the game, but at the moment, we're set in Warsaw and we're doing things. But you go around and you interact with the environment, you find notes, you speak to people, you get into fights. And when you do this, you come to conclusions and you gather information about the people in that area. And what you do with this is that you use the information that you've gathered and the power, well, the information you get with your powers to understand the feeling and the meaning behind the notes and the actions, the items that you've found. You then can use that to your benefit when it comes to conversations with people. For example, somebody that typically, if you walked up to them and tried to have a conversation, tried to get them to do what you want, would be really aggressive. You can use your knowledge of how they're feeling and what is deep down in their soul in order to get a favourable outcome for you and potentially for them. And as in the thing, you can play the game like a complete asshat and just go around going, I hate you, I want you to fight me. And you can get almost any like circumstance you can solve with a violent dynamic. But you can also talk your way around it and make things easier for yourself in the long run. There's also from what it seems, a reputation system with characters. For example, when you pick certain dialogue choices, it comes up that they'll remember that. Now, whether that is for the negative or for the positive is entirely down to you. You're essentially building relationships with the characters that will come up again. Obviously, not all characters are going to be recurring in the game, but you can usually tell those ones because they're either, family, childhood friends. Literally, Rasputin. I'm not even joking. Rasputin's in this game, seems like a nice guy. But yeah, like, this is the kind of extent of it. It's, you can build, like, your relationships with characters, and I'm really excited to see where that goes and see how my choices affect the game in the long run. Now, the other part of the gameplay loop is the combat system, which is pretty much like a turn-based game. Now, this follows the kind of Final Fantasy style fights where, you take turns, you do certain actions like punching someone in the face, but you can also use your salutars or demons to do actions as well. So you're never alone in battle, they are always there with you, and they have different abilities. For example, the first salutar that you get is armed with a sword, so he can slice at people, but he also has an ability that can regenerate your health. The second salutar that I managed to get is all about stacking debuffs, and then it gets increased damage based on these debuffs. But on top of that, different salutars, when they interact with different enemies, can break their traits, and this essentially makes them easier to combat and easier to take down. So you need to think of who you're going to use certain salutars on at different times and how that is going to affect the combat system. Overall, it's actually quite fun. I really enjoy the combat in it. There isn't a huge amount of it. It's not like I can go out into the world map and just run around in circles until a random Russian guy tries to punch me to death. It's very much a case of there is specific battles that you can take place in the game, and you trigger them by either walking into a circumstance where somebody's getting ambushed by a bunch of thugs, or, you just tell people to their face that you want to punch them in the face. It really just depends, but the combat system has been incredibly fun to play with so far, and as I gain more salutars, that is obviously going to become more complicated and complex, and I'm assuming at some point there's going to be a similar kind of fight from the enemies, where it's not just going to always be a guy armed with a club that I send my demon Jedi powers at. So yeah, it's been relatively interesting. Now, because obviously the RPG aspects and things like that, there is a leveling up system, and you do level up and you can upgrade your abilities. But when it comes to that, you get the majority of your XP, or at least I have so far, from interacting with story elements and discovering things and looking around and, investigating. Uh, when it comes to the combat, you do get XP, but you don't get anywhere near as much of it as you would from investigating. So if you're not interested in a game that, is very wordy and investigatory, this probably isn't for you. If you're looking for something where you just beat up enemies constantly, this is very much not a game I would recommend for you. But if you are interested in story and narrative, characters and plot development, it has been fun so far. I'm actually really quite enjoying it. And it annoys me that I can't play it as much as I want to, because I'm like, I want to know what happens. I want to find more stuff and learn more things. And overall, it's just a little fun game. Now, obviously, this is a first impressions. I can't give you my full thought process of the game, because sometimes you enjoy a game in the beginning, and then at the end, you're kind of like, I just feel like it was lacking something. That remains to be seen. I'm not far enough in it to give you the full in-depth, but if you are interested in story-driven RPG-style games, and you're interested in the early 19th century and the aesthetic of it, I would definitely recommend giving it a shot. It's a fun little game, and you're supporting a relatively small developer. It's Fool's Fury that does them, so they're not one of the big names in there, but I definitely think they're doing some good work, because the game looks absolutely stunning, and I have enjoyed it so far. Either way, guys, that's my thoughts on it. I mean, for other people that are going to comment on this, what do you guys think? If you've played it already, do you share my first impressions of it? What's everybody's thoughts on how it looks on the screen? And with that, I'll catch you all next time. Maybe in Warsaw, because there will be a follow-up video of this. So we might be in Warsaw next time, but probably next time in the Wasteland. Either way, night.
Piles of pixels gathering dust, forgotten worlds left to rust. Controllers heavy, memories fade. Strength to continue, feeling so frayed. Backlog breakdown, tearing me down. Digital demons spinning me round. Games to conquer, battles inside. Just one last fight, pushing my pride. Quest and conquest, stories untold. Achievements mocking, getting me rolled. Installing updates, head starts to spin. Virtual victories, where to begin? Wasted missions, nights without end. Virtual